Good morning. My name is Brian Winters, and I am one of the co-chairs of the Aboriginal Affairs Advisory Committees. The committee secretary has confirmed that we have quorum, so I will call meeting 11 of the Aboriginal Affairs Advisory Committee to order. Welcome, everyone. And just as a note, if you aren't speaking currently, please stay muted. This meeting is being held using the city's WebEx technology with members and staff connecting by video conference or by calling in. Because we are meeting remotely, we ask for your patience with any delays and technical issues. We have 11 registered public speakers today. The public can watch the meeting streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/Toronto City Council Live. I would like to remind all staff and presenters to keep their mic muted with their video turned off unless they need to address the committee. This will make it easier for the co-chairs and those watching along on YouTube to observe members as they participate in the debate and vote on each item. Members, please keep your mic muted unless you wish to question staff or speak to an item, and ensure that your video is turned on. As part of each agenda item, we will ask members to raise their hand or unmute their mic if they wish to question staff or speak. We will then create a speakers list and will call on members when it is their turn to speak. When voting on an item or a motion, I ask that members ensure that they turn on their video and raise their hand to indicate their vote. Members, I want to remind you that although you are participating remotely, you must still submit your motions in writing to the committee secretary. The clerk staff are available by email at ecdc@toronto.ca to help with motions. To start off this meeting in the right way, we will now have an offering by Selena Young, Director of Indigenous Affairs Office, to be followed by an opening blessing by Suzanne Brunel.
Merci, Brian. Good morning, Tasikia Matan. This morning I have prairie, sage, and tobacco and some cedar in my smudge bowl. I realize it's not quite the same virtually, but I offer these medicines to each of you to help us start in a good way, good hearts and good minds. Merci.
Brian, do you want me to proceed? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Much has happened since the last time that we met. So this morning, I really want to offer a prayer to the children. So Creator, we stand with all Indigenous people, all people in mourning the terrible loss of the children who were physically taken away from their families and who are in the process of being found. We are both profoundly sad and relieved. We grieve for these children's memory, for their struggle, for their spirit. We are also relieved that we can welcome the children who have revealed themselves and to learn from them. It is time. Because today, the world is ready to truly listen to their stories and the stories of countless others who suffered through the Canadian residential school system. So we pray, Creator, that you guide us through the many emotions that we are feeling. Guide us towards positive and supportive actions that honor the values and traditions of our ancestors and that honor the children. Enable us to move forward with compassion, with humility, with respect, and with much love as we work our way forward along the path to healing. Merci, Chimigwich.
Nakamik. Thank you, Selena and Suzanne. Although we are in different locations and meeting remotely today, the Aboriginal Affairs Advisory Committee acknowledges the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? If you have an interest, please raise your hand or unmute your mic to let me know. Seeing none, may I have a motion to confirm the minutes from our last committee meeting on April 16, 2021? I have a motion from Francis. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Nakamik, any opposed? Ruth, that was for in favor or opposed? Okay, Ruth seems to be having some technical issues. The motion carries. Before we proceed, may we request Andrea Christian to give us a brief message on what has been discovered in Kamloops and is continuing to be discovered from coast to coast to coast. Nakamik, Andrea, when you're ready.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Brian. I'll go, Selena, for the prayer, and to you as well, Suzanne. And I appreciate this opportunity for us to showcase, and I acknowledge those of you who have your orange shirts on. It's your hearts that is really critical and important for these young people. So, David, I believe that you're working alongside with the clerk, and you will assist us through this the process. We wanted to demonstrate we do everything visually. So, what I've asked David to do is to create an outline. So, David, if you could go ahead through the process, that would be great. And to those of you who know that Council Fire has worked with our survivors within this region, as well as throughout Ontario and across the board since 1989. And the intent of the Spirit Garden that was initiated in 2016 was intended especially for that. Was intended to ensure that what we're doing is acknowledging our mother first, the land that we all occupy, that we're a part of, that we survive on, and it's to the survivors, and many of our survivors, in addition to the 215 Kamloops that have been lost and rediscovered in past weeks. David, do you want to go ahead to the next, please? And again, as you know, the Spirit Garden is intended and was created specifically for the, and this is what we are going to have this outline appear. It's to be reflective of each of our nations, the Métis, the input in terms of the land, the turtle herself, plant life that provides us the sustenance. And while we may be in the city of Toronto, there's no reason why we can't also ensure that we're sharing the beauty of who we are as many peoples and many nations. And so what's critical here was, again, has been the water, the symbols that come to us, and the sisters, the three sisters that look to ways and means of supporting each other through life, through death, and thereafter through the ceremonies. And back to Skyroll. Again, we acknowledge the plant life, and to us, it's the beans, squash, and the corn, which are really significant. And then the Gaswanta, which is that turo that reminds of our responsibilities that we have for each other. The lodge itself is the Anishinaabeg's teaching lodge that is symbolic of the our lives from the eastern door through the western door. And currently, we're coming the opposite way, just for technical purposes. The turtle is mounting over a boulder, and it signifies all of those different residential schools themselves, that there's 18 within Ontario that they are also anticipating, the recovery of many of our family members. And again, through the evening, we acknowledge the nighttime, which is part of all of creation who records for us through the star world that our families, and we know that our spirits will be returned into our homelands. And again, as I acknowledge that the plan here for completion installation will be 2023. And this is an initiative that's been created for and with our survivors, and wanted to ensure that this is in place, and that we do have a place. We have a recreation, as I say, of a world that is loving, caring, non-discriminatory, and willing so much to be a participatory within all of creation and life. We're acknowledging each of our components and designers and artists who've made this possible, who have all been sought from who they are as Anishinaabe, Métis, Inuit, and different members of our nations and their contributions. The next component, following this particular acknowledgements of our creators, of the artists, will be an initiative that's actually been initiated by our survivors who were devastated and wanted to ensure that they also created an ability for their acknowledgement, because they too are afraid to hear what's going to happen. And as part of initiative, again, our creation story is also going to be implemented on the side of Council Fire. And again, it refers to our turtle, all family members who are part and parcel of different clans from the earth to the sky world. And so we want to make sure that's really critical. David, if you can go to the so these are our individuals who were devastated and wanted to host something. They hosted it a week ago at the Spirit Garden site. They wanted to ensure that they're also giving up their hearts and their grief to the rest of the other families who have recovered their. So we were able to conduct this with the survivors themselves, and they did create 215 spirit plates, and through the spirit plates, that each one of them were burned because we didn't want to leave it there. Ensure that part and parcel of the ceremony, and we chose to bring out the berries, which is very significant in medicines and in terms of along with our tobacco to be burned. And each one of these were burned by members of our community as well as the survivors who they made up. And so to the survivors of Kamloops, I also acknowledge the survivors, the families that were just recently discovered, the 104 that were discovered from Brandon, Manitoba. And I also want to acknowledge all these different initiatives that we're undertaking to restitution for our families and our relatives. And I give acknowledgements to the initiatives that you all do, and I want to do a special mention to the celebrating opportunities, for a new journey to reintegrate from incarceration, and how the Thunder Women Healing Lodge creates this pathway. And I believe the women that they're representing are also members of the residential school survivors. And we have to give that all families that opportunity, and children, which is so critical to have that journey to reintegrate from, back into society with love and with caring. And that each of our initiatives is critical for us to ensure that we're all a part of that process. So with that, I say I won't go for having the opportunity to present this, and I look forward to us working together collaboratively for those young ones who have passed and their relatives who are above ground in different capacities, to see how our services, including the Aboriginal Affairs Committee, can work for a positive resolve and love, caring. Yeah, I won't go.
Nakamik, Andrea, thank you so much for that presentation and update. We'll now proceed to consider the 7 items on the agenda, and I'll hand it over to my co-chair, Pam. Nakamika.
Thank you, Brian. Hello, everyone. The first item on the agenda today is the Indigenous Affairs Office update. We will begin with the staff update on this item, when we will then hear from the registered public speaker before moving it back to the committee. So I understand that Selena Young, Director of Indigenous Affairs Office, will give an update to the committee. Selena?
Marcy, Pamela, and Brian. Nanaskamo, Suzanne, for starting us off in a good way with your prayer. And Nanaskamo, Andrea, for your words, your leadership, your heart. I appreciate you sharing all that you've just shared. When it comes to the Indigenous Affairs Office, I'll share, it's not an exhaustive update, but I'll try and share a few highlights. So the Indigenous Affairs Office has been happily busy welcoming 2 new team members, Ashley Najawan and Jennifer LaFontaine. Ashley Najawan is a Métis woman from Wikwemikong and Dokis First Nations. She grew up in a traditional family, learning about culture, the ways of her ancestors, her role as an Anishinaabe Kwe. She is also finishing her Master's of Indigenous Relations program at Laurentian University, and her thesis is on grief, trauma, and healing. Jennifer LaFontaine is Métis from Duck Lake, Saskatchewan. She comes to the city with 20 years of community building work within the not-for-profit sector, as well as being an Indigenous. She is an artist, earthworker, and educator, and uses media and storytelling to amplify community voice. She has recently worked on storytelling projects with Indigenous youth to encourage their communities to get vaccinated, as well as 2 spirit survivors of residential and day schools to share their stories of healing and reconciliation. We have led the recruitment of 8 Indigenous youth research associates that have started in divisions throughout the city, including shelter support housing administration, environment and energy, planning, public consultation, and within the Indigenous Affairs. We continue to support city divisions, mayor, and council. A few examples of that, we're collaborating with the Housing Secretariat to establish regular meetings and relationship protocols with Indigenous housing providers. Some of you are on the Aboriginal Affairs Advisory Committee. We're working with colleagues in Parks, Forestry, and Recreation on a range of initiatives, including advancing access to land and water for Indigenous communities, supporting the Indigenous engagement for the Toronto Island Master Plan, as well as the Ravine Strategy. We've been supporting the People and Equity Division on the recruitment of an Indigenous human resources specialist. We've also been supporting the Mayor and City Council with various statements and the development of motions that work to advance reconciliation into action. You may have heard Councillor Layton's words at the last council meeting about that motion and pushing us to do more. Thank you, Councillor Layton, for that. Continue to try to support Indigenous organizations and communities, supporting the development and rollout of the Essential Skills Training Program. That's the partnership with Ms. Wade Beek, People and Equity, and Toronto Employment and Social Services. We're supporting Thunder Woman Healing Lodge in navigating city processes towards the development of the amazing Healing Lodge at 2217 Kingston Road. We're engaging with land stewards and earthworkers in High Park on how to support their work on the land. And we continue to work with Indigenous leaders and Toronto Public Health to support vaccination. On June 1st, we developed and shared the 3rd Indigenous Affairs Office newsletter, e-newsletter. This issue really aimed to amplify the events and activities happening in community. If you're not on the mailing list and want to receive future issues, please let us know via email. The easiest email to use is indigenous@toronto.ca. And last but not least, to assist with virtual events and programming for National Indigenous Peoples Day and Indigenous Peoples Month. We engaged Kelly Hashimi, very grateful for Kelly's support, and Eskimo Kelly. We will be posting a video that was created at 5:30 a.m. On June 21st to mark Indigenous Peoples Day. This video is a virtual walkthrough of the ceremony that will be taking place on that day with the elders. The video also contains greetings from Mayor Tory and Chief. And I will leave it there. Merci, committee members, for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Young. We're now going to hear from the registered public speaker, and then we'll bring it back to the committee for questions of staff. We have one registered public speaker, and I will ask the committee secretary to confirm that our first public speaker, Catherine Gandy, is ready to proceed.
Madam Chair, Catherine
Yes.
Gandy is not connected to the call right now. You may want to
Okay.
proceed on the script. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So I'll turn it back to the committee if anyone has any questions for Selena. Seeing none. We have nothing left on this item. So we'll have a motion to receive the item. Anyone? Tracy? All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion is carried.
The next item is item AA 11.2, filling vacancies in Aboriginal Affairs Advisory Committee membership. We will begin with the registered public speakers on this item before moving it back to the committee. We have 3 registered public speakers. I will ask the committee secretary to confirm that our first public speaker, Miguel Avila Varade, is ready to proceed.
Mr. Co-Chair, I can confirm that Miguel is on the call.
Good morning, Miguel. Welcome to the Aboriginal Affairs Advisory Committee. You have 5 minutes to speak, and when you're getting close to the end of your time, I will let you know. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Good morning, everybody. It's good to see everybody today. I'd like to start with giving a few words of good news. The community of Region Park has been advocating since 2006 for a fire pit at our newest Region Park. And finally, Lula, the Assistant Councilor of Precinct 110, has confirmed that as part of their capital project for the season of 2021, there will be a building up a fire pit that can be multi-purpose use, following the example of the successful project at Dufferin Grove Park. I think they have been able to employ a member of the community to allocate time and spaces for community members to hold up space for ceremonies or for other events, family gatherings, I don't know, marshmallows at night, whatever. So we are willing to ensure and share with the community at large. So that's the good news in this coming Indigenous month. I want to thank everybody for that, my counselor and the Council of Fire as well for their ongoing support. I love to hear that we are debating again the issue of the enhancing the membership of the Aboriginal Affairs Committee. That is my biggest work we are undergoing here. I want to say that I attended the April 16 meeting, as you are aware, on the record, and I explained to them that we need to encourage more participation from other voices, you know. And I think you, my dear brother Brian Winters, you raised a comment that why don't we change the terms of reference? Simple. I belong to the community neighborhood association of Region Park, and we have done already the work of finishing up our terms of reference. And we have a part which includes membership. We welcome people, voices. That's what you need to do to enhance the voices of the community, especially the grassroots. My sister on the line, Tiffany, I believe that she can make a huge difference if she's part of this committee, because she has the knowledge and experience of being a grassroots activist in the city of Toronto. Come on, friends. We just acknowledged the loss of lives at residential schools. An apology is not enough. Any money compensation with the world will change the damage or repair the damage. What we believe is that systemic change, profound changes to our society will ensure that we have a successful truth and reconciliation. When we start building pipelines in British Columbia, it will make sure that our friendship with Canada will be stronger. Anyway, I'm bringing back to the item. I'm an activist as well, and I have a great desire to be part of this committee as well, because I believe that my voice will be important in my experience at City Hall for 10 years. No, I thank you, my former employer at Toronto Zoo. After leaving the Toronto Zoo, I became an activist. So I had the best teachers in the world. Thank you very much. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your remarks. Members, do you have any questions for the public speaker?
This is Andrea. Brian, it's not so much questions that I just want to acknowledge Miguel, because Miguel has played a major role in this region and within Region Park, and has tirelessly gone after a number of issues, and specific in particular, I want to acknowledge the fire pit, because this is something that we've looked for. And I think it's been an issue that's been on the agenda. So, Miguel, as always, I see you and go to you for your ongoing support. Yeah.
Nakamik, Andrea. Any other comments, members? Thank you, Miguel. Sorry, go ahead, Councillor Layton.
Sorry, it's on the report itself, not on the deputation, so I'll wait.
So we have two more public speakers listed prior to getting to that. So I will ask the committee secretary to confirm that our second public speaker, Tiffany Malley, is ready to proceed.
Mr. Chair, I can confirm that the second public speaker is ready to proceed. Thank you.
Welcome to the Aboriginal Affairs Advisory Committee meeting. You have 5 minutes to speak. When you're getting close to the end of your time, I will let you know. Please go ahead.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, Aboriginal Advisory Committee, City Councilors, IO, and City staff. My name is Tiffany. My spirit name is Woman, who is as beautiful as the fire. I am Bear Clan from Treaty 13 with family relations in the surroundings of Turtle Island. I would like to speak to the agenda item AA11.2. I would like to recommend and ask the committee to make an amendment to the terms of reference under section B, number 1, composition and terms. I would like to recommend and ask the council to amend the terms of reference to include Indigenous Toronto community members, elders, and Indigenous community members of Indigenous grassroots movements. As a longtime standing member and Shkabewis for over 17 years, I have worked in some of the agencies which is represented here on the council. I even did a volunteer gig with TASAC in the last 6 months. I listened closely to these meetings when co-chair at the time, Francis Sanderson, spoke of 34 units, a gig that was in place with the city and the Daniels Corporation. We were all wondering, including me, how many Indigenous families were in these units. I also wanted to find out. I made relentless calls, relentless emails to the Daniels for over 4 months, getting no response. But finally, Daniels did get back. Wood Green has the 34 units, and sadly, 0 units are allocated for Indigenous families. This was discouraging. There's another project that's happening with the city at 150 Dunn. This housing project too is for homeless individuals, and there will be a dedicated allotment, but speaks to being dedicated for Indigenous community members and other racialized communities. I asked the housing secretariat team and the city if they would allocate 10 of the 51 units to Indigenous community members, irregardless of which nonprofit housing provider wins the RSP. Sadly, I was again unable to get that commitment from the city. I would like to nominate myself for a seat on the advisory committee. There has been more than 10 seats on the committee vacant for a very, very long time. To amend the terms of reference will reassure the community members that the committee is listening and is open to creating and building positive relations. We acknowledge and say miigwech to the many bailiffs, firekeepers, agencies, and all the dedicated humans who have been doing phenomenal good works for our people. Together, we can create opportunities for self-sufficiency, social entrepreneurship, and a strong committee that will ensure that voices are heard and echoed within the system structures. It would be beautiful to create a policy with the city to ensure that every nonprofit allocates a percentage of their housing stock to Indigenous community members, in addition to the 5,000 that the city has already committed to Indigenous community members. I would like to say miigwech, and I will also like to say thank you. Have a wonderful day and happy Nash Day.
Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you for your remarks. Members, do you have any questions for the public speaker? Seeing none, I will ask the committee secretary to confirm that our third public speaker, Catherine Gandy, is ready to proceed.
I do have a comment there. Sorry, Brian. I do have a comment with in terms of with Tiffany.
Go ahead. Thanks,
Okay,
Andrea.
thank you. First of all, Tiffany, you go for your presentation, and as always, really appreciate listening and hearing and working with you, because you look at solutions, and that's something that's really critical, and why a number of these agencies around the table have been created. And I just want you to know that you do have Toronto Council Fire's support in terms of a member on this table. And I think it's always important to ensure that we have individuals with experiences, families, and especially around the housing. And for me, I have spoken with Tiffany to look at positive solutions and in creating opportunities for families and those who are also on the streets, those who are elderly. So I just want to make sure that I do acknowledge you, Tiffany, for your presentation. So yeah.
Thank you, Andrea. Does anyone else have any words for Tiffany? Seeing none, I will ask the committee secretary to confirm that our third public speaker, Catherine Gandy, is ready to proceed.
Mr. Co-Chair, I can confirm that Catherine Gandy is on the call. I must say that I apologies to Catherine. She was actually on the call earlier under a different name. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Welcome to the Aboriginal Affairs Advisory Committee. You have 5 minutes to speak, Catherine. When you're getting close to the end of your time, I will let you know. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Hi, good morning, Aboriginal committee members. I am Shakwetmik and Ojibwe. I have lived in Toronto all of my life. And I'm just speaking to the agenda item in terms of proper representation of including our community members. Yes, there has been vacancies for quite some time, but here we are with new appointments. I'm in total agreement with both Miguel and Tiffany becoming new members on board as community members. I also would like to encourage the committee to seek out youth for new appointments, youth that are active in our communities, but also have lived experience as being houseless, involvement with the child welfare system, youth that have lived both on reserve and in the urban city here. I think that part is really crucial to ensure that youth voices are at the table. In terms of the housing piece, I feel that a lot more could be done. I know there's a lot of bureaucracy that occurs, which makes it difficult to have new housing developments. I was also on the community engagement meeting in regards to the Dunn Street, and the housing secretary asked for my contact information in terms of, having new housing development, special allocations for houseless folks, and as well as mothers and children. In terms of the rapid access, it's for predominantly single Indigenous folks, whereas there's a huge need for new housing stock for Indigenous families. The follow-up that did occur with Daniels Corporation indicated that the Aboriginal Affairs Committee is in ongoing discussions with Daniels, and as well as through the meeting with Dunn Street, one of the councillors, Gord Perks, I believe, stated that there is a ongoing discussion with the committee, and there will be a memorandum in the works. So I just am asking that there be more transparency and accountability in regards to those discussions that the Aboriginal Committee has with the Housing Secretariat each month, and to what is the new appointments listed on the City of Toronto website and also on the City of Toronto, specifically with the Indigenous Affairs Office, so that our community can see the upcoming developments, not only with the new appointments, but also housing and the Truth and Reconciliation recommendations that the City of Toronto has recently adopted in terms of, in lieu of the unmarked burial graves on the Secwepemc lands, that recommitment from the City of Toronto, and as well as concurrently in support of the calls to action, also needs to include the overrepresentation of Indigenous children in the child welfare system, and what's happening here in Toronto, and what one of the agencies is doing in terms of child welfare and lowering the number of children in our community going out to non-Indigenous foster group and residential placement. I think that's also very important too, in terms of the housing piece, and hearing from our youth as to what their experiences have been in the child welfare system we're currently still facing, because housing is central to the foundation of our people. And if youth that are aging out don't have the housing, then it's not the family reunification is not going to be successful, and the youth are unfortunately going to be facing mitigating factors which would be detrimental to their health and life and social variant. This is something that's very, very dear to my heart. As being my grandparents went to Kamloops Residential School, and my parents are 60s scoop survivor thrivers, and my two older children are Millennium Scoop survivor thrivers. So that central piece of those new appointments, in which the agenda piece I'm speaking to encompasses new appointments where the top priorities would be housing, child welfare, health and social, the beautiful work that Council Fire is doing in terms of supporting residential school survivors with the monument, with the ongoing developments of Anishinaabe House, where our health and social is going to be going up so our people have more access. But there will also be new housing developments, which includes all of the agencies. So in working together with the good work that the Aboriginal community has done thus far with the two new appointments and youth and residential school 60 scoop Millennium Scoop survivors, I think that City of Toronto will finally be at the point where they can say that they are actively working towards reconciliation. Chinigwech, Cookshem, and thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Catherine. And I will note that you're almost 2 minutes over. So just, I know you're listed as a speaker on every item today. Please try and stay within your time frame. Does anyone else here, do any of the members have any questions for Catherine? Francis, go ahead.
It's not a question. Good morning. But I would like to say, miigwech, thank you to Miguel, Tiffany, and Catherine for standing up today. Your support, your activism, and your passion certainly are evident. And each one of you shines a light on very important issues that are raised with the Aboriginal Affairs Committee. On a timely rotation. We hear these all the time. We hear how important these are. And I want to congratulate you. Thank you. And whether you are accepted as a member of the committee or not, please know that your words are important. Your constant support and input is valued. And I say thank you very much for coming today and voicing your passion, your emotion, and your desire to make Toronto a more inclusive, welcoming place for all members of our community. So I say thank you very much. Miigwech.
Nakamik for that, Francis. And Catherine, you did make one mention that I would like to offer some clarification on, and that was about outlining the discussions that the Aboriginal Affairs Advisory Committee is having with different agencies having to do with housing, etc. Outside of these meetings, the Aboriginal Affairs Advisory Committee does not meet to discuss anything. This is the function of the committee, is what you're involved in right now. I would also like to identify that the IAO, the Indigenous Affairs Office of the city, has sent out a report just now while we've been speaking. So I'd like to call on Selena or somebody else in the IAO to speak to this report, please. When you're ready, Selena.
Marcy, Brian, and committee members. The report really kind of captures discussions that we've had at the last couple of meetings around the 8 seats that are currently vacant on the Aboriginal Affairs Advisory Committee. So you'll see in the comments section of the report, we try to capture some of what we heard in the conversations previously, suggestions that current membership could potentially be enhanced by including elders, youth, members of the Two-Spirited community, for example, as well as some sector representation that's been discussed. Really, what we've tried to do here, based on those previous conversations at the Aboriginal Affairs Advisory Committee, we pulled together a draft recommendation for consideration. It includes amending the draft, includes amending the terms of reference to include some community members. The way it's written, the report recommends 2 community members, but it's really only a placeholder. It can be changed should the committee decide another number is more appropriate. And in addition to the recommendation of amending the terms of reference for the Aboriginal Affairs Advisory Committee, the recommendation asks us to fill those vacancies as soon as possible, especially given that this term of council and therefore the term of the Aboriginal Affairs Advisory Committee would wrap up next year in 2022 because of the municipal election.
Thank you for that, Selena. Sorry, we're just having some back and forth via email to sort this out. So would somebody like to move a motion to adopt the recommendations listed within the report? I'm not certain everyone has had the opportunity to read the report yet. Members?
If I have some questions of staff. Yeah, thank you. And my apologies for being late. I was actually serving on the Civic Appointments Committee, which today was booked at the same time. And I've been on that committee for about 5 years. And there's 2 different pathways for how the committee determines who is selected as candidates for advisory bodies, agencies, boards, One is that the staff intake is all done the same way, where people submit their resumes to postings and then, or fill out a form, and then staff compile that information and categorize candidates as highly qualified, qualified, not qualified. And at that stage, then there are 2 pathways, 2 branches to the road. One is where city staff conduct the interviews and select the candidates, and then they submit a list of the staff candidates to the Civic Appointments Committee and then to City Council. So the Civic Appointments Committee, which is 5 city councillors, don't interview the candidates directly. We rely on city staff and their opinion. And then there's the path where the list of candidates who have submitted their names goes to the Civic Appointments Committee. We select which candidates to interview, and then the committee, the committee selects the successful candidates, and then they go for council. Both ways. One, the staff way is non-political, and typically used for things like advisory bodies for the access and inclusion advisory body. I believe that's how they're selected. For the music advisory body, I believe that's how they're selected. And then most of the city agencies go the other way. This was a really long question. The question would be, it doesn't say in the report who does the interviews and selection. Do we have an idea of who would do that?
Thank you, Councillor. To be honest, I'm very open to what you and the committee members think is the most appropriate approach, and going that way. I don't have.
So here's where my challenge is. As the only non-Indigenous person on this committee, I believe it's a great privilege of mine to serve with all of you. I can't understate that. There are no Indigenous people, councillors in general, but specifically on the Civic Appointments Committee. So there are 2. There are 2 problems I think I find with that. One is in the legitimacy of the decision that's made, that the individual represents the community, and then the second is the lack of our colonial constructed system in how we evaluate expertise. So I think Selena can help with that. The IAO could help in when city staff from the Civic Appointments Office vet the candidates to determine their qualification level. But really, that's only one factor. The interviews and how the counselors interpret the resume or the individual on paper really feeds into how the selection is done. All of this makes me a little bit uncomfortable. And there doesn't currently exist another system where the politicians make when the politicians do the interview. So I think we could be creating a situation where the Civic Appointments Committee suggests a couple names, and then those names become public. And the problem is, then they go to council. Well, not that I think there'd be a contentious name, but if someone challenged the individuals being selected from the Civic Appointments Committee, it can be damaging to people who are identified if we then try to change those names at council. We've been in this situation before where political appointments were made, and there were people that were unhappy with the names that went forward. And once a name's on that list, it created some challenges at council that included the very public, not attacks, but criticisms of certain individuals that were on the list. I'll tell you exactly, because I was the one critical of it, is there was a decision to appoint to not have the necessary diversity you would have on something like the TTC board. And I took great exception with the committee's decision. I was on the committee. I took exception to it and advanced it at council, and it ended up being just very messy. And so I don't know if I don't have advice here. I only have advice. I don't have a solution though. So I don't know how we tackle that. Please, Selena, I'm
Thank
done.
you.
Okay.
Thank you for that, Councillor Layton. Go ahead, Selena.
Marcy, Brian, and Councillor, and I might have to rely on my colleagues and clerks in the city manager's office because I don't know if this is possible. But given what you've experienced and shared, Councillor, I wonder if there is an opportunity for members of the Indigenous Affairs Office in partnership with the co-chairs of the Aboriginal Affairs Advisory Committee, or other members of the Aboriginal Affairs Advisory Committee to be doing the interviews and putting forward the recommendation. I would really like that collaborative approach, but I don't profess to know all the rules that we're supposed to follow.
If I may, Brian, I would suggest that we need to make up our own rules in this one. Like this, I don't know what it looks like. Something what you've suggested there, Selena. I don't think it would be allowed, but I think we need to push the barriers here because council shouldn't be deciding who is an appropriate voice to be on this committee from the community at large. I really think we should be rubber stamping a committee a decision and recommendation that comes from this committee or from the wider Indigenous community. I don't know how that would be done either. I would support anything we can do to that end if clerks could answer if we're able to.
Hi, Selena and Councillor Layton. This is Robin. I'm the acting manager of the Public Appointments Office. So currently the process would be for staff from the Indigenous Affairs Office to, and this is from the terms of reference, to canvass and recruit members and make recommendations to the Civic Appointments Committee. So it is a staff-led process. I think changing the process there could be discussed for the next term of council, and I believe my colleagues in the city manager's office are on the call as well, and might be able to help chime in on that. But as the process currently stands, it would be a staff recommendation coming forward to the Civic Appointments Committee.
Robin, I'm
Thank you for
pushing a
that.
little bit here. If it's a staff recommendation, so I'm putting forward that recommendation as staff, do I have, and I would just hope I could just make this happen as part of my process as staff in the Indigenous Affairs Office. I would engage the co-chairs of the Aboriginal Affairs Committee as examples to help with that process.
So currently, we don't currently engage appointed members in the appointments process. It's typically done by staff. So I'm not sure if Brendan can comment on that or.
My name is Brendan Nolan. I am from the city manager's office. Just to echo what Robin was saying, we have traditionally maintained a separation between the appointed members and the staff when doing the appointments process, just because, as Councillor Layton has spoken to, sort of the staff process was perceived as sort of non-political versus the councillor's process, which to maintain that differentiation between those who were sort of appointed by council and who have dealt with council, and then the staff recommendation, because the staff recommendations ultimately do go to the committee for consideration. Now that said, sorry, I'm going to move my mic a little closer if that helps. That said, turn it up. To echo what Selena was saying, it is a recommendation from staff, and it is very much would be framed as a recommendation coming from the Indigenous Affairs Office, facilitated by the city clerks to Civic Appointments Committee, and it can be made very clear that that is the fact, that's the process being made in this case. We are going to be doing consultations later this year with all our advisory committees on learnings and processes and best practices to take forward going into the next term for changes potentially and for adjustments on how we can improve on our processes. And certainly we want to hear all that input, especially from the Aboriginal Affairs Advisory Committee. And so this may be a process that we want to look at and make changes to. That said, the current terms of reference do restrict how far we can go, and going beyond that may raise additional challenges or potential for challenges to the process, because council would have to make a change to the actual terms of reference before we could entertain that potential change. So you don't necessarily want to get too far ahead of yourself in making the change before you before I guess council has permitted that change to be made, if I'm sort of laying behind my names.
Yeah, thank you for that, Brendan. And it sure seems as though all roads are leading to changing the terms of reference. Unfortunately, it sounds like your consultation timeline is being sped up a little bit by this meeting. I did see that Frances had her hand up, and Andrea did as well. I'm not sure who was first. If you guys could volunteer who put their hand up first.
Frances was first. Go ahead, Frances.
Miigwech. Thanks, Andrea. Age before beauty, right? So I'll go first. Obviously, it's a flawed system. It's obvious when it comes to Indigenous matters, Indigenous people, and our community. It's a flawed system. We're turned into pretzels to meet the terms that are in place for the rest of the world. I don't think it should be an issue. I think it should be whatever the committee decides. This is why we're here. We're here as a committee. We have places to fill on our committee. I think we should be given the ability to fill those places on our committee with candidates that will will inspire us, will make us feel a little uncomfortable, will help us to change things, will help us to make it better. And who better to do that but the members of this committee? I always go back to the same story about the male gynecologist telling the women how labor is and how it's going to be. You don't know. It's impossible to know. We know. We're in those shoes. We walk that path. We vision for the future. So why would you go to someone who doesn't know rather than to someone who does? So I think it's time that we did a little bit of pushback. It's time we didn't sit on the rules that have always been in play for the general and help them be a little more specific and a little more supportive of the Indigenous community. Thank you all.
Thank you, Frances Nakimak. Andrea, when you're ready.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Frances, because I always appreciate having you share your words. And I want to share with you my frustration. For being an Aboriginal Affairs Advisory Committee, it appears that we have others who are not part of our community that, including those individual staffing, that have no place in our affairs. So I want to be really clear. We're sitting here. Those of us are donning, the orange T-shirts. Those of us who are members of the community. Those of us who come from residential school. Those of us who have found our way to this community. I've heard three tremendous, consistent representation from the two ladies who I have a fine regard for and known one for many years, and the other most recently, and their passion that brings to the table, along with Miguel in terms of his passion. I think if your intent is to belabel this process and to take it on until somebody else is dead and that we're digging them up, I find that's not going to happen. So again, we don't need to ask. We need to assume the responsibility that we're here. I don't believe any one of us went through an interview process, to sit on this committee, and I don't believe that. That's up to us to determine a process that looks at who fits or who doesn't fit, because it just reverses the whole issue. What you're doing is you're contributing towards a disruption of our community that take exception to those of us around the table, and that we need to be supportive. I'm one that is very much supportive and will advance the adoption of added members. These three individuals who are being put forward can provide us some really positive experiences. When I come to Toronto from circumstances off of a community in '66, and in learning that process here, for currently now to find out how we should be representing our community, it makes me feel really bad that we can't step back and assume our responsibility as Ongohongwe, Anishinaabe, Cree, and Métis, and others. So I think we need to make that decision. We need to make that decision now to adopt that. It's up to the committee to determine what members are going to be advanced, and we do that today. So then we can have them at our tables, resolving. So we're not doing any consultation, and I don't want to have the City of Toronto, the IAO, or the municipal input. That's up to us to do. So I'm advancing that now.
Hi, Andrea. I'm just I was following along. I'm trying to understand. Are you passing a motion? Are you suggesting a motion right now?
I am. Thank you for that, Brian. Yes, I am passing a motion that the Aboriginal Affairs Committee advance the adoption of the individuals being advanced. I have other individuals I'd like to add to it. Patty Pettigrew from Thunder Women Healing Lodge, who deal with individuals on the ground, who are incarcerated and coming back into the city. We just, we owe it to our community, to be inclusive as opposed to exclusive in determining who should. So yes, I am moving that motion. And I'm looking to my good friend Francis to second it.
Go ahead, Francis.
No, I'm seconding Andrea's motion to put it on the floor, certainly for this committee. There are others as well. I mean, there are a number of people who, for whatever reason, have not stepped up. Sometimes it's because they weren't asked. Sometimes it's because they didn't think they had a place to come forward. I mean, there's 7th generation midwives who are an important and becoming a more important segment of the community. So yeah, I think it's time we started to look at this, and so I very respectfully and I'm honored to second Andrea's motion.
So I'm wondering, Andrea, is it possible for you to complete, like, compose a motion that be presented?
I believe that's the job of the chair, the co-chair, and your developer at the table. So I'll leave it to you, and then I'll assist along in terms of what it could and should say. No.
Okay, I did see that Ruth had her hand up. Ruth Colasar Green, did you have something to say? No? Okay. So would it be?
I would.
No, I'm not hesitant.
Gotcha.
I'll do it.
Not.
So we did have a motion sent forward by the clerks, and I'm wondering if that might help. The motion states that the Aboriginal Affairs Advisory Committee requests the Chief Planner and Executive Director of City Planning to incorporate the committee's suggestions for amplifying Indigenous voices into the engagement process of Our Plan Toronto. I'm starting to think this is for the wrong item. Can I get a motion to accept the recommendations that the IAO put forward? Would that be possible? Has everyone read the report, by the way?
Brian, I don't know if you want to do that given what was just presented. I mean, there's 2 separate motions, but we may want to work on drafting the motion that Andrea just spoke of, which I think clerk is working on.
Excellent. Thank you, Selena.
Co-chairs, this is Sylvia. I'm just displaying the recommendations that are in the report from the IAO. As to the motion from member Andrea, we would really benefit from some text. We do need a starting point. So if the member, if Andrea, if you could please state how you would like the motion to read, we do need that starting point.
Thank you.
So my understanding is that Andrea would like to recommend the names put forward of the speakers that were here today. She also wants to put forward Patty Pettigrew's name, and that later there will likely be more names. So if you would like, I can behind the scenes with the clerks draft a motion, and when it is ready, we can present it at the end, Andrea, for final wording, and we can move on to our next presenter in the meantime while we work on working on the wording of the motion.
That's amazing, Pamela. Thank you so much.
Perfect. So our next item, and clerks, I'll email you in a moment, is Ryerson's Learn for Empowerment program. So we'll begin with a presentation and we'll hear from the registered public speaker before moving it back to the committee. And I understand today that we have Tracy King, Indigenous Human Resources Lead, and Scott Sunday, Indigenous Program Coordinator, who will provide a presentation to the committee.
Excuse me, this is Nancy Martin. I have wanted to make some comments about the presentations from Tiffany and Catherine before you move on.
Sure. Sorry, Nancy, that we missed you. Please feel free.
Okay, thank you very much. I wanted to thank Tiffany and Catherine for the presentations that they made today and coming forward with their concerns about access to City of Toronto housing stock. I did want to say that there are systemic problems with regards to Indigenous people in the City of Toronto accessing City of Toronto housing stock, and that these systemic issues need to be addressed by the housing department within the City of Toronto. And I'm referring specifically to the priorities that the housing department established many, many years ago. And they do not prioritize Indigenous people in any way, even though Indigenous people represent the largest homeless population within the City of Toronto. So, for example, within the priorities for assigning these thousands of units that are owned by the City of Toronto, for which we are all taxpayers, the priorities totally exclude Indigenous people. This is a human rights issue. And on a more positive note, I believe ongoing remedy requires that the priorities are revised to include, if not prioritize, Indigenous people to make up for lost time, and also for our speakers to go through their city councillors and suggest, ask for the way forward is what I would suggest. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Sorry, go ahead, Brian.
No, I was just going to say, I don't know if you're still on the call. Go right ahead, ma'am.
I am sorry. Camera's off to help with audio. So I will just pass it back over to Tracy, and then we will work on the motion behind the scenes. Thank you, everyone, for your patience.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me well?
Hello, I apologize. This is Nahum with the City Clerk's office. Tracy, it appears that you are logged into the meeting on multiple accounts.
No way. Okay, let me see.
So I am, with your permission, I'm going to boot the Tracy King that does not have their camera on.
Okay.
And if you could...
Can you hear me now?
Sorry, it looks like there are other instances of Tracy King. Just one moment.
I was having technical difficulties on my desktop and my laptop this morning, so.
Okay, it looks like we are not getting any feedback. If any member is getting feedback, if you could... Nope, looks like everybody is good. Okay, Tracy, I will turn it over to you. Thank you.
Wonderful. And Scott's here. So we're going to start. So good morning, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here to tell you about an exciting program that is going to be starting at our university. It was designed and created and will be directed by Indigenous peoples working at Ryerson, as well as Indigenous community members, such as traditional peoples, to come in and do parts of the program. The Learn for Empowerment program is aimed to start at, and actually this has changed as of October 2021. And we've had a lot of phenomenal help with our partners, which are the Office of Aboriginal Initiatives at Ryerson, as well as the Human Resources Department there. The program is essentially a program that is designed to give up to 10 participants work experience that will essentially build their skills, will include work experiences, include their Indigenous knowledges, because we have that built in the program, and that also will be accompanied by the fact that this program is going to be a 3-year program. Ideally, what we're going to be doing in the first year is the pilot. And the pilot program itself is going to be for 12 months. It is in no shape or form, it's not an internship program. The great thing about this program is that we have our Indigenous participants who we will be recruiting over the next couple of months and over the 3-year period as well. And the participants will be receiving a salary for those 12 months and benefits. The salary is starting based on an income that is comparable to how the Toronto labor market and housing market is like. So the salary would be $56,000 annual, and with benefits. So the great part about this program is that the department leaders from various departments across the campus will be bringing on an Indigenous participant. And the participants will have a program that will upgrade their skills and their work experiences. It's all hands-on. They will have a mentor and coaching. They will also be able to get sustainable skills where and more experience, especially in the higher education sector, to do various types of work, because they'll be able to transfer those skills and experiences with us, as well as what they know. And ideally, what we're going to do is do everything we can to keep them on at Ryerson. And because that's my priority, that was one of the priorities I had, is that, we support them, and that, that department leaders, if they want to hire them right from the program, it's an option which is up to them. Although some department leaders have wanted to have new Indigenous participants to learn other departments. There's also learning that's coming to department leaders and their staff, so that they know what it is like to work with Indigenous people, that they know the history, the current realities, and so forth, so that they can have welcoming space. And I'm very happy to be talking about this. Okay, next slide. I'm so passionate about it. I just have so much to say, so I'm going to try to be as quick as I can. So, with respect to Ryerson's commitment to reconciliation, we know that the TRC had essentially recommendations that employers create programming that's going to increase the employment and education of Indigenous peoples across the country. And there are two recommendations or calls to actions with regards to this. The great thing about this program is that They will be receiving skills training, but as well, if they want to embark in a post-secondary education, they're able to do so part-time or take our transitional year program, which provides them with the first year academic skills to enable them to apply should they want to. Again, should they want to. With this program in mind, we also did our TRC consultation with our university community, and essentially we have done extremely well with faculty hires. Currently, we have about 28 Indigenous faculty working at the university, and that has quadrupled from the last few years. So we're doing great at that end, but now is the time that we do it for the staff. So first year, we're going to select 10 participants for the first cohort. And then each year after that, ideally, I'm looking for 15 to 20 participants to go through this program. So we're going to be looking for your assistance with the recruitment part. Next slide. Next slide. Okay. So, oh, you went too ahead. Go back. Thank you. So the Learn for Empowerment program is a program that, like I said, was created by Indigenous people. It also was given a spirit name. It's trauma informed. As you may know, that I've done frontline work for quite some while, since 1990, and have worked in shelters and so forth, and Mizwe as well. So what I'm going to be bringing is a trauma-informed approach, as well as everyone who's going to be training or delivering the different parts of the program will be learning about a trauma-informed approach with Indigenous peoples. And this is one important element that I believe was missing, that I've noticed has been missing from Western employers, is not including this part, because Indigenous wellness and health are very important for our community, and we had to have that piece in our program itself. So we have been ongoing developing that this past year, as well as the fact that we want to ensure that where they're placed, that it's going to be culturally safe for them, so that they can practice ceremony at work, so that they can show their strengths as an Indigenous person, their resilience and so forth, in whether they take learning with us and participate on the work experience program. Okay, next slide. So these are the numbers, and we know what the numbers are, and I like to use task numbers. Those are usually the ones that I'm more inclined to use, but we do have the federal numbers, but it's estimated, 80,000 or more Indigenous people work and live in the Greater Toronto Area. And one of the things which I had noticed when I first began is that we had only about less than 30, close to 30 actually, Indigenous employees that self-identified at the university, and now it has increased to about 115 Indigenous employees working for us. So it's drastically increased, which I'm very happy about. And this is another pathway for our peoples that, for instance, maybe didn't have the opportunities because of, the barriers that exist for our peoples in finding employment and competing within a very competitive work industry in Toronto. So we are selecting candidates to get that experience. And then we're going to also assist them with obtaining work, whether ideally, like I said, at Ryerson or at another workplace of their choice will get additional support. Okay, so this program, because they are employees with one of our collective agreements, they will also be able to learn about their rights as employees, human rights as well. They'll also be able to identify different areas within the university where they might want to work next, possibly as well. Next slide. So one of the things I've recognized over the past few decades is that, all of us as Indigenous people, we want that good life. We want to be able to support our families, have good housing, have good employment, be able to get education or training if that's the case, and be able to have a support around them. So we've created a support system which includes not only the employees that work with us, but we have a First Nations, Métis, and Inuit community group, which is made up of our staff and our faculty. So we regularly meet, and we have meetings normally on a monthly basis. And also faculty and staff can contact me, as well as now they can contact Scott Sunday. And what we're doing is something that's, I think most employers should be doing, or all employers for that matter, is finding separate pathways and unique pathways to bring in Indigenous people in where they're at. So they may not have a post-secondary education, but I've seen some phenomenal people who have come in, and they have been many of our best employees because they have that working knowledge, or they have that community knowledge, or that Indigenous knowledge, or that lived experience. So that's what I would like to bring into the university and show them how wonderful we are. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, I'm going to leave this to Scott. This is Scott Sunday.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for the invite. So some of the outcomes that we've determined through the pilot project will be that participants can apply their transferable skills to gain that experience at Ryerson, at the university, and then hopefully stay or otherwise support them with other employment opportunities. They will be matched with a mentor at the university who will support them, and I will take that. I will also be supporting both of them as well, so the employee as well as the mentor. And we are doing job summaries currently that we're working together on, that will build meaningful work, that will identify some of the sort of barriers that exist and address those while they're working, and that hopefully will bring them to a point where they're well positioned, and they have the knowledge that they can compete for opportunities at Ryerson or elsewhere. Next slide, please. So the longer term impacts that we have identified is that over the 3 years, just as Tracy mentioned, that we're looking for 10 people for this year. And then we're going to increase that number from 15 to 20. And as she mentioned, it's going to be paid with benefits. It's also going to, we're also going to integrate this program eventually into the HR strategy that exists in the hiring practices. Next. And through this, the university will be enriched by hiring Indigenous people, either by sharing the knowledge in terms of traditional cultural knowledge, having those conversations to to understand the realities of Indigenous people. And current employees will be attuned to the unique traditions and culture and lived experiences that that we bring to the university. And we're hoping that in the end of it all, that we could further take this learning across the number of years that they are there. Next slide, please. So what we've done so far is they've hired me back in November. My main responsibility is to manage the project, to do some community outreach and some relationship building. Recruitment, Tracy and I will be collaborating on that. We'll also be doing some research and some data collection so that we have some tangible things, information that we can use to support the program. And I'm the right hand to Tracy, and we work very close together. So one of the other things that we had, we changed the name from the Ryerson Aboriginal Work Experience Program to Learn for Empowerment. The spirit name was given by Joanne Dallaire. And unfortunately, at this point, I'm Ojibwe, so I don't know much Cree. So you can read it and hopefully practice it at some point. There's a sound clip within the slide that you can play, I hope. Nope. No? Okay. Let me try it here.
I'm wondering, can
you hear that?
Can you do the auditory?
Sorry, could you hear that? No? Because it's PDF, I'm not able to access that. So we'll send that along afterwards. And the other thing is we have a committed work group, an advisory circle. We have a number of people who, in different levels of employment, we meet regularly. The work group meets every 2 weeks. The advisory circle is once a month, and are provided updates and are managed by me. And yeah, so next slide, please. So some of the best practices we incorporated was having an HR working group who are going to indigenize the curriculum development, the communications. We will have a separate website. We will have support from the communications department through marketing and branding. And as well as the working group will be working on materials for onboarding and learning. The advisory circle advise, they champion the program as well as provide guidance and support. They're going to provide input into the evaluation that I'm working on currently. And they will also be seeking other funding opportunities to keep the program going after the 3 years. And learning and development, we are currently providing learning opportunities to the department leaders and their staff, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, as well as the HR department. So some of the things that we've held were a trauma-informed session with Dr. Renee Linklater. She did a presentation to everyone, and we had very positive feedback about it. And this was all before the discovery in BC. And so next, again, we use the Indigenous perspective of using a trauma-informed lens and also keeping it culturally safe as possible. Next slide, please. Whoops.
I just wanted to add, Scott, that we on the advisory circle, we have 8 members, and the majority are Indigenous leadership and staff who are on that group. So many of them have worked in the community, but have found work in the university sector. So I just wanted to add that, and I just wanted to add that that we have strong support from the leadership of our university, and they've funded this program like up to about, I'm not going to give the exact amount, but up to $500,000 is going towards this program over the next 3 years. So I'm very happy with this, and I have Scott's from Ontario Federation of Indigenous Friendship Centers, and he's worked there for 21 years. So he's been so helpful, and we're just having a great time with this program and picking each other's brains in terms of what needs to be in there. Okay.
Thanks, Tracy. Next slide, please. So why are we here today? First of all is to introduce the Learn for Empowerment program to you, and also to promote the program within the GTA. The following year, we'll be doing a province-wide outreach, and we will also be recruiting participants for the Learn for Empowerment program to build stronger relationships with Indigenous organizations. So as Tracy mentioned, we will be reaching out to various community members as well as agencies within the GTA to promote the program and hopefully get some referrals from them. And we are going to also prepare for and attain career opportunities at the university. And as Tracy mentioned,
Can I just add one thing?
Yeah.
I just want to say that the two systemic barriers that we have at the university is the fact that they look for Western credentials, and secondly, they want direct work industry experience. As Indigenous people, there's still very few of us working within this industry. We need to find ways to bring Indigenous people in through this other means, this program like this, where we can give them that work experience, where we can give them that hands-on type of work experience, where we can give them the skills they need. They can learn about the structure of the university if they choose to work in a college or university, or who knows, maybe they might get a great position back in the community. It's up to them, right? So I just want to add that.
Thank you, Tracy. And I think that's the last slide before we have the question and answer. So we'll move on to the question and answer because I know we're running a bit behind.
Thank you so much, Ms. King and Mr. Sunday. We're going to hear from the registered public speaker, and then we'll bring it back to the committee for questions for both of you. We have one registered public speaker. I will ask the committee secretary to confirm that our public speaker, Catherine Gandy, is ready to proceed.
Madam Chair, our registered speaker is ready to proceed. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Welcome again, Catherine Gandy, to the Aboriginal Affairs Advisory Committee meeting. You have 5 minutes to speak. When you are getting close to the end of your time, I will let you know. Please go ahead when ready.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I just had a quick question. I was just wondering if there has been discussion in and around access to childcare for interested candidates with this new exciting program that you just did a presentation on. Thank you.
Yes, we have actually identified as a potential barrier for participants. So we are in discussions about how we're going to be able to assist, whether it's advocacy, whether it's the finding of funds. Definitely. I was a single parent too, so I totally understand where you're coming from.
Catherine, do you have any other comments or questions?
I would think that it would be a good partnership with the ECE program. I know that on site at the downtown Ryerson location that there's a daycare there, and maybe if I'm not sure what work happens behind the scenes, but I think that there's room for growth, especially in lieu of the ongoing work in and around X University and Ryerson Egerton being the architect. Well, one of the architects of residential schools, that Ryerson really encompass providing ongoing holistic reconciliation actions, and that includes ensuring that Indigenous people's families have access to equitable, affordable childcare, whether in the program or also for other community members that are in different programs with different agencies, for example. I just think it's really important that Ryerson step up, and it's really nice to hear that there's going to be a new opportunity in September, which encompasses reconciliation efforts to our community. It's really interesting, and just thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, Catherine, and thank you for addressing the committee today. So we have heard from our one registered public speaker on this item, and I'll turn it over to members if you have any questions for the presenters on this item. If you do, please raise your hand or unmute.
I just wanted to add that Scott is going to be primarily doing the recruitment. So he's wondering, he's going to be contacting the leadership in the organizations in the GTA, all the way out to Peel and so forth, and to Scarborough. And so he's going to be requesting a meeting with you about how to facilitate a virtual recruitment session with clients or students of your organizations. Gotcha.
Are there any other speakers to this item? If you wish to speak, please raise your hand or unmute. Seeing none, do I have a motion to receive this item? Suzanne, all of those in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
As the clerks are still working on the motion for the previous item, I'd like to suggest that we move on to the next item for the time being.
Can I just offer something here, Brian, please?
Sure.
It's Andrea. And thank you. Y'all go to Scott as well as Tracy for that presentation, because it's really encouraging to see the opportunities that are being offered. But what becomes really difficult for me, again, when we're talking about the Truth and Reconciliation, and we're actually using the name of Ryerson in any of the in one sense, and then using the Anishinaabe of a good life, right? So I think it's really important from where I sit that if there's an opportunity, I'd like to see what the working is with the the groups, Indigenous groups within the university, because I can't even say that name. That where I use that with helping to restructure and rename. I'm looking at the history of Ryerson itself and the contribution that he has been the developer of the education system was not intended for Indigenous people or Indian people at the time, because he thought we were too stupid to learn. And so here we are having a tremendous presentation that's made, and we're still affiliating ourselves. In one sense, we're using the name. I don't know what's clearer is to rid of this name in totally that now that the statue is gone, I think they need to do other things, or at least move the program to different institutions that if they're not prepared to, to acknowledge the process that the communities would like to be a part of. Yeah.
Okay, so there is a task force with regards to the Egerton Ryerson legacy, and I know that I can't speak directly about what's happening in the task force, but I can tell you that there was strong recommendations. There's, strong recommendations of different things like the removal of the statue, and but one of the strong recommendations was renaming the university. So there will be a decision on that in the fall or before September, because the president's office is going to be having to make that decision, and he knows he has to make it right away. So I just thought I'd share that with you.
Don't go, Tracy, and it's not to take anything away from their presentation. So amazing. Yeah.
No, Kamik, thanks. Thank you for that question and your reply, Tracy. Are there any further questions regarding this item? Seeing none, the next item is item AA 11.4, Indigenous engagement for the Municipal Comprehensive Review. We'll begin with the staff presentation on this item. We will then hear from the registered public speaker before moving it back to the committee. I understand that Jeffrey Cantos, Manager, Official Plan, City Planning, and Stephanie Burnham, Planner, Dillon Consulting, will provide a presentation to the committee.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Are you ready?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can. When you're ready,
Great.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen with the slide deck. Okay, hello everyone. We have just about a 10-minute presentation, and we'll get to the point. And this will be on the city's Municipal Comprehensive Review. We at City Planning, we've named this process our Plan Toronto, and I am honored to be here to present about it. As the co-chairs said, my name is Jeff Cantos, and I'm the city's manager for the Our Plan Toronto process. And just a really brief introduction of who I am. I'm also a son of immigrants from the Philippines, and I've been a practicing urban planner for a number of years. And before joining the city, I had the privilege to actually do some planning work for the city of Iqaluit when it became a capital city way back when. And it was through that experience that I was able to gain an appreciation for an understanding of, the Inuit population's relationship with the land, sea, and the air. So I do hope that this Our Plan process, the city can, and I can continue to learn from the Indigenous community through listening, such that this process can actually help support the Indigenous communities here in the city. So with that, I want to introduce Stephanie Burnham. Stephanie, do you want to unmute yourself?
Scano Aguego, everyone. My name is Stephanie Burnham. Goahendase ni Gyosa. I am Keuga Nation Wolf Clan. I grew up in the community of Six Nations of the Grand River Territory. I grew up with a grandfather that was residential school. So this is kind of a lot of good conversation that I'm hearing today, and a lot of empowering conversation of change and motivation to create and start moving forward from our past, and knowing that there's a lot of change that has to take place. So I did my undergrad at the University at Trent University, where I did international development studies. And with that, following that, I went to Argentina, where I worked on UNDRIP in the coordination of the Indigenous Summit of the Americas, working with a number of youth and bringing their voices into the document of what we know today as UNDRIP. A lot of conversations that happened on the ground in that forum is not what we see in the document today, but a version of it that was accepted recently. And then since then, I worked with my Confederacy chiefs, and I worked with my band councils, and I worked with a number of communities throughout Ontario through the Independent First Nations in land use and development and program management. And so I have a deep understanding when I come from my community and from working with my chiefs of sovereignty and self-determination, and the importance of our voices and how planning has had a strong history of oppressing and removing our relationships from the land and relationships from each other in some way. And so I just wanted to bring that into the introduction of who I am and where I come from and my perspectives. And I do a lot of work as well. I also want to add this, is that I've been doing a lot of work within planning to look at municipality and relationship building. So understanding that a lot of Indigenous communities, when it comes to municipal planning processes, have been sitting at the table and banging their fists on the table and needing to be heard, and knowing and understanding that our treaty rights need to be acknowledged throughout these processes, and that these things, that there's change that needs to be created. So I'll pass it back to Jeff.
Thanks, Stephanie. So our objective for the rest of the presentation this morning is we hope to provide you a high level of information on the Our Plan Toronto process. We want to describe this project and how we can help support Indigenous planning in Toronto. And then we want to consider how we can help amplify Indigenous voices, again, through the Our Plan Toronto process. So why don't we just get into it? By 2051, the City of Toronto is forecasted to grow by 700,000 more residents and by 450,000 more jobs. And we require a plan to direct this growth. And we do that through the official plan. So what is an official plan? The city's official plan is the City Council adopted document that sets out basically our roadmap into the future, and it includes our shared vision, values, and includes policies on many different aspects of the city, the economy, the environment, land use development, and more. And in other items later today, you'll hear from some of my colleagues in city planning of how we actually implement some of those things. But I won't steal their moment. And so as part of the Our Plan Toronto process, we are going to be and have been asking very big questions, and we'll be posing them to members of the public as we update our official plan. One of them being, how can the forecasted growth address some of the issues that we in Toronto are facing today? And other questions are on the slide. This Our Plan Toronto process, the Municipal Comprehensive Review, is a provincially required process that all municipalities must undertake. And we have to demonstrate to the province that we have a plan in place to accommodate the growth that's forecasted for the city. And our deadline to complete this work for what's called conformity to the provincial plans is July 1st, 2022. So we are at the beginning of this process. My last slide before I pass it off to Stephanie is that we want to take this provincially legislated process and take it as an opportunity to address and align some of the issues that we're tackled with and facing with the city. For example, we want to make sure our affordable housing plans, our infrastructure and open space needs are aligned with our official plan. We also know that a plan for 2051 must address climate action and mobility. And the Our Plan process, we hope to address the existing systemic exclusion and displacement. We in city planning and all divisions in the city, our future plans must include the lens of COVID rebuild and recovery. And finally, our hope and our intent is to ensure that any plan that we come forward with, the council supports Indigenous self-determination and helps support reconciliation through these land use policies that we put forward. And with that, I'll pass it over to Stephanie.
No, hey, Jeff. So I know Jeff said it was going to take about 10 minutes. I'd like to take a few extra minutes just to provide some context to the committee here, because I feel it's super important to understand why we're or the approach that we're taking on the engagement strategy. And so what some of you may or may not know is that the provincial planning policy statement is what guides a lot of the decisions that are being made within the municipal planning regime or planning conversations. And so this official plan is it has to align with that in some way. So in 2014, it was one of the first amended versions that included the need for municipalities and development and proponents to engage with Indigenous people. Now, the language was extremely weak at that time, and so the newest version of the provincial planning policy statement that came out in 2020. Has kind of pushed the stronger language of shall engage and shall consult with. So the conversation is starting to change within planning, and that understanding, the governments are starting to understanding the duty to consult, and that there is definitely a need to engage Indigenous peoples in these conversations about the planning of their land, and that Indigenous peoples have been saying this for a long time. We have the Gaswenta as our two-road treaty. It was, established in 1613 that clearly identified this relationship that needed to take place between us. And so we know that the change that needs to happen within planning decisions and that our future is dependent on this. And that as Indigenous peoples, our safety and our perspectives and our relationship to the land and to each other is super important and needs to be starting to be incorporated in these conversations in order to lead us into the direction that we need to go as self-determined peoples. The municipalities have been, we know that, municipalities have been planning Indigenous lands for generations before us, probably about mid-1800s. This has been going on, and that we were kind of excluded from these conversations, and that our conversations of planning as Indigenous peoples reflect more around the conversations of sustainability and relationship building and making sure that everyone is taken care of on the land and all these things. And so these kind of conversations need to start coming together. And so at this time, the official plan and the process that we're currently starting is as official plans in terms of a policy and a planning document is not comprehensive in terms of their approach in all aspects. However, they are a mechanism where we can start to implement that Indigenous self-determination conversation and implement Indigenous planning perspectives. So the city is starting to use, or the city is using the Municipal Comprehensive Review Project as a catalyst for this change and making sure that we bring forward the voices of equity-seeking groups and, most importantly, the Indigenous groups. And from some of the conversations that I heard previously, specifically Catherine and Tiffany and Miguel, and the conversations about housing and understanding that there's a need to be incorporating these perspectives into this conversation. And so developing an engagement strategy, and this is part of my role and where I'm coming from as third party with Dylan Consulting, is that we are developing an engagement strategy. My goal is to make sure that this engagement strategy is specifically focused on Indigenous conversations and Indigenous planning interests and making sure that it is Indigenous led. So building this strategy right now and working together with many Indigenous organizations such as yourselves to ensure that the strong Indigenous voice is amplified throughout the official plan, and making sure that the engagement strategy is focused on Indigenous interests and making sure that we are hoping to promote, again, those planning interests that are super important to us as a people. So some of the goals that we're hoping to achieve through this is to make sure that it's focused on relationship building, making sure that we're stepping out of the engagement consultation conversation that is normal to planning, and it kind of keeps that voice boxed into this engagement consultation conversation, and broadening it to that relationship building and making sure that we are stepping beyond the boundaries of these planning conversations to formulate relationships. Again, the conversation of bringing in and incorporating the perspectives that we have as a community within as urban and as well as treaty holders and self-determined peoples, and then reflection and representation on the diversity of the community and making sure that we're having these conversations in safe zones enhancing the role of Indigenous decision-making to promote Indigenous self-determination. And this is specifically important to making sure that the official plan is again, in relationship to the conversations of before, that diversity and that inclusion conversation, but also being enhanced and focused on the Indigenous voice. Next slide. So when I stepped into this role, I realized, like, and in conversations with Jeff and stuff, that we've discussed that there definitely needs to be a framework in terms of how relationship building will going forward and making sure that it's long term. So there is, we are seeking to incorporate that principled approach and developing a principled framework that is based on Indigenous conversations of what those principles need to be in terms of relationship building. But for myself, in order to do the work and coming to you and to coming and going to a number of the treaty rights holders and a number of other organizations, is some of the principles that I carry is making sure that there's meaningful involvement and making sure that we're walking together throughout this. Our goal here today, and as you can see on the slide here, that we're looking at engaging early and engaging often. Like Jeff mentioned before, that we haven't necessarily stepped out and we've launched the program. However, we're still working on developing materials. We're still working on developing the engagement strategies for the program or for the project. And so this is all still real preliminary work that we're working through. Making sure that the engagement strategy and that our conversations are accessible and proactive throughout the engagement, and making sure that there is a level of transparency and that there's trust and honesty, that we can have frank conversations and that we can be real around the table about some of the issues that we're dealing with and some of the concerns that we have. So our goal, as you can see, we're in pre-engagement, and then as we move through the various phases throughout the project throughout the project, we are making sure that there is two-way communication. So as you can see in phase 2, we are setting direction and making sure that we're validating what we heard and that we're coming back to you through this conversation time and time again to kind of make sure that there's still that two-way dialogue going on. And then in phase 3, developing those guiding policies and recommendations to make sure that the relationship is a continuation from this conversation, that it's not just ending at this project, that it's an ongoing thing, and making sure that Indigenous planning within the city is fully incorporated into the official plan. Next slide. So to date, we have done outreach. Like I mentioned, we talked with treaty rights holders. We are working on coordinating a meeting with MCFN right now. I have reached out to 6 Nations and the Huron-Wendat, as well as Williams Treaty. Indigenous organizations, we're here today meeting with you and the many affiliated organizations within AAC, as well as TASK, and we have a meeting set with them next week. We have about 4 other organizations that we've reached out to as well, and still waiting for them to get back to us on some of these conversations. And so as we develop the engagement strategy, and hopefully at some point it does transform into a pathway to relationship building. This is kind of my hope and dream, is that we are seeking guidance and recommendations on how to ensure that our engagement on this project includes that strong urban Indigenous voice that is in a manner of supporting that Indigenous self-determination. Next slide. So in order to build the engagement strategy and in order to make sure that we're starting to build in those activities that need to happen, and that we're able to bring people together in ways that can create safe spaces, and again, those accessible spaces, is so I provided some of these questions here that we are hoping our early outreach with you guys and many others can help us to answer these questions. For now, some of these questions are how do you want to be engaged? And do you have any recommendations on how we should engage yourselves or any organizations that you are working with? And are there other groups that we should be engaging with that we may not be aware of or may not have contacts with? And how can this process support Indigenous planning or capacity building and making sure that we're supporting your participation throughout this process? So as we progress throughout, there's also a number of other questions that we're looking to ask that focus on the vision of Toronto and the vision that what you want to see to make sure that our people in 2051 are safe and healthy and self-determined and working towards where we need to be as Indigenous peoples within the city and within our urban areas. And then making sure that reconfirming again in phase 2 that are we hearing you correctly? Is this the language that you want to use? Can we strengthen this language? And then finally making sure that the voice has been amplified, that we've done our job, and that there's ongoing relationship, there's ongoing conversations happening, and that we're able to move forward beyond the project. Next slide. And so some of our, we did, like I mentioned before, we did mention that there was a launch. The engagement process is happening between April of 2021 to February 2022. And then if you need to stay updated, here are some of the links that are available for you to connect on social media and to receive updates and other information that is going out right now. Is there any questions?
I do have a question. So to the extent that the official plan relates to housing, that's more of a suggestion than it is a question, I guess, but to the extent that the official plan relates to housing, affordable housing affordability, I would suggest that your consultation reach out to the Indigenous housing providers in the City of Toronto. I'd suggest that you might consider meeting exclusively with as a group with the Indigenous housing providers, that the consultation be structured in a way that the groups it's made clear how the official plan can impact directly or indirectly on housing and housing affordability, and groups are given an opportunity to provide concrete, meaningful suggestions about what can be included in the official plan that will advance housing affordability for the Indigenous community. I think that, I'm struck, as I often am, not just on what I heard today, but what I've heard in other meetings. I'm struck by how often when consultations are being held, the view is that it's useful to go to umbrella groupings, and umbrella groupings definitely have their place. The advisory committee itself is in effect an umbrella grouping. Task is an umbrella grouping. But I think when consultations are held, it needs to be made clear to segments of the population how the consultation impacts on what their particular interest is, and their specific expertise should be solicited, as opposed to exclusively reaching out in sort of an umbrella fashion and saying, tell us what you think. I'm not saying that's what's happening today, but I'm just saying on a go forward basis, that would be my advice.
I agree. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Cantos and Ms. Burnham. We're now going to hear from the registered public speaker, and then we'll bring it back to the committee for questions of presenter and staff. We have just the one registered public speaker right now, so I will ask the committee secretary to confirm that our public speaker, Catherine Gandy, is ready to proceed.
Mr. Co-Chair, our public speaker is Catherine Gandy on the line, is ready to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to the Aboriginal Affairs Advisory Committee meeting. You have 5 minutes to speak, Catherine. When you're getting close to the end of your time, I will let you know. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Stephanie and Jeff, for your presentation. I took some notes in regards to key recommendations in terms of strong urban, how strong and urban Indigenous voices in a manner that supports self-determination, what that would look like. Well, myself, I exerted my self-determination rights, my sovereignty rights to care, protect, and raise my children in regards to one of the child welfare agencies here in Toronto. And I would say that was extremely challenging, especially because of the provincial.
Hello, I'm sorry, to the speaker.
No, not right now. I'm on a call.
Hi, to the speaker. I'm sorry, to the speaker. This isn't home with the city clerk's office. Your audio seems to be a little inconsistent. I don't know if you're moving your mouth closer and further away from the mic that you're using, but if you could keep it consistent so that the members can hear you properly. Thank you.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, if you could just say a few more words, please.
Okay. In regards to the self-determination piece, and as a title holder, I'm saying that
I'm sorry. Your audio is still coming a little inconsistent.
As a title holder, I am saying that Treaty 13, the Huron-Wendat peoples, and as well as Indigenous agencies that are members of TASC are on the list in terms of people who have been consulted and what the ongoing consultation looks like. I think it's very imperative that all title holders, so that means all community members, which are title holders, whether they hold a status card or non-status or Navatsubit card holders, sovereignists, are consulted. And what that looks like to me, as one of the lead founders of Matriarchal Circle, which is a grassroots organization, which is an advocacy group with mothers, grandmothers, aunties, and two spirits on board, that Matriarchal Circle be consulted. We do work in and around health detriments, and as well as housing, child welfare, missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, and as well as the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action. The missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls 200 plus justice calls need to be adhered by City of Toronto, and that's a lot of fielding to go through in terms of those 200 plus justice calls. But if City of Toronto wants to come to the table with all the title holders, organizations, it's very incumbent that the City of Toronto meet the needs of Native women, Indigenous women, Métis, Inuit, Two Spirits, and make sure that the City of Toronto is not only livable for us, but it's safe for us. Because right now we're continuing to not feel safe in terms of whether or not our children are going to get stolen from us. The continuation of residential school genocidal legacy, 60s scoop, and now the present millennium scoop. There's things that need to be addressed in terms of the Cherry Beach Starlight tours that happened, where people would be brought over there and subjected to extreme police brutality by the Toronto Police Services. I've brought this up before to the former police chief, Bill Blair. You know, there's an apology that needs to be issued from that organization, and as well as lowering the number of Indigenous children in the system. this process to me looks like an ongoing engagement with grassroots people, having town hall meetings, whether it's on Facebook, Instagram, making sure that there's proper notice to the community, engaged with elders, knowledge keepers that are on the grassroots level, youth, two spirits, women, men, and especially, you know, to our survivors. And we're all survivors and thrivers of colonialism, but unfortunately, we're seeing the remnants of it all. And so it's been a very fruitful conversation in terms of the city of Toronto coming up to speed of what Indigenous people already know. We have the solutions. It's just time to put everyone's solutions at the table. And it's very heartening to see that the Aboriginal Affairs Committee is making the, how would I say it? Given the city of Toronto's constraints, which ultimately faces, you know, it's difficult to try to navigate, I think, for the Aboriginal Affairs Committee in terms of going against the policies which are not congruent to the self-determined needs of the Indigenous population. I'm seeing very promising movements going forward. And the self-determination piece, I mean, it can be interpreted in many different ways, but just to have this conversation alone is great. And I think the most important. Yes.
That's you're over 5 minutes now. And I don't know, I can't speak for the other members of the committee, but I don't know how much of that I caught just because your connection is very poor right now. I apologize that's happening, but it's very hard to understand what's being said. So thank you for your remarks. Members, do any of you have any questions for the public speaker? I see Francis has a question. Go ahead.
It's advice. I'm giving you advice. I agree with what Angus had stated earlier, and I'm looking at your page 12 of your document, and it says, to date, we have begun outreach with treaty rights holders, Indigenous organizations, and that's where I stumble and trip. First of all, you had mentioned Six Nations and the Mississaugas of the Credit. We're talking about Toronto here. We're talking about how to build Toronto, how to make it sustainable, equitable, prosperous for Indigenous people. I would think that you would put more stock in talking to the people who live here, the people who call this home. I mean, it's nice. You might as well ask Ottawa too. What do they think? What's happening there? I mean, it's good to listen and hear with these things. But if you say you to date you've done outreach to Indigenous organizations. I haven't been talked to. I'm not sure about how many other members of this committee have been spoken with, outreach to. So who have you talked to? Who has been on your list? Who have you reached out to get your information so far?
So in terms of like the Indigenous organizations are primary to the conversation, because you guys are on the ground and this is where you live, this is your home, right? And in terms of the organizations, so I've been working with Jeff Daunt and Selena Young to some extent in terms of the treaty rights holders relationship. And our goal was to take a comprehensive approach, as comprehensive as we can understand it, and then hoping that in coming to AAC, that understanding kind of the formalities, I guess, in terms of reaching out, and coming to AAC and coming to task and understanding a little bit about how do we do those outreach to the organizations that you're working with. So this is like the very first step that we're looking at, is just coming to you and kind of presenting this information. And then from here, we're hoping that the outreach to the organizations will start to formulate and start to come out.
So you really haven't done any outreach to the Indigenous organizations so far?
Not on the ground yet. No, I'm coming
Even
to
though
you,
it's printed here that to date you have already begun that.
This is the first step. Sorry. That was I guess the big question that we were asking as part of our presentation here was, how do you recommend that we ensure this is, comprehensive and going forward, and making sure that we're really engaging with the organizations, and what is the best approach to do that? How do we make sure that we're reaching everybody, as many people as we can?
Well, just to build on that, Stephanie, I'm not shooting you down.
No, that's okay.
Listen, if this is too hard for the answer, can you imagine what it's going to be like when you get out there on the street asking people? They'll be jumping all over you. But we have been consulted, we have been talked to, so much has been written down. I hope you've taken some of those dusty reports off the shelf and read through them, because we're going to be saying the same thing again. It's going to raise its ugly head. We need more housing. We need more affordable, deeply affordable housing. We need health care. We need education. All these things, it's been stated year after year after year. Do me a favor, take all those reports off the shelf, read them, take a look at them, because those words are still as valid today as they were 25 years ago when we first said them to the city, when they started asking us and consulting with us and meeting with us and taking our words back, saying they heard them and they've taken them to heart. And then they put out their programs and we're not there. So do me a favor. I just want you to look good. I want an Indigenous person to shine. And the way you're going to shine is to be successful and listen to what's being said. Miigwech, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Francis. Do we have any other comments from members? Seeing none. Thank you for addressing the committee today. And members, do you have any questions of staff on this item? If so, please raise your hand or unmute your mic to let me know. Angus.
I just want to go back, actually, before we ask questions of staff. I just want to sort of follow up on Francis's comments. Yeah, I just think that I mean, probably the city hires firms to do consultations because the firms that they hire have particular expertise and knowledge of the area. Maybe they've got a knowledge and expertise in planning. Best of all worlds, they've got a knowledge and expertise of the Indigenous landscape in the city of Toronto. I just really I find it I don't know, frustrating or surprising. I've heard it so many times in the last year that when groups are looking to do consultation, that the first thing that they seem to think to do is to reach out to the Indigenous Affairs Office and speak to, I don't know, Jeff and other folks. I don't think that that's really a good sign. I mean, that's not a reflection on the IAO. It's just a reflection on what groups that are being hired to do consultations ought to have a good, strong knowledge of from the get-go. So I'm just going to leave that out there. I'm really yeah, it's not the first time that we've had groups come to us and say, we've begun the consultation with Indigenous organizations, and we all sit around the table and say, like, not to us. It's really getting kind of frustrating.
Just a brief. Don't take the low-hanging fruit. Just because the IAO is at City Hall, you have to go out and talk to the people. Perhaps what the IAO can do is give you a list of where we are if you don't have a phone book. Give us a call. Talk to us.
Yeah, that's been the outreach with them. Basically, was just a little guidance on the lists that we need and who have they been working with, and a little bit of guidance in certain ways and that. And so this was kind of the guidance we received. And making sure that you guys were one on the list. And then beyond this, it's definitely we'll be reaching out to organizations as individuals and touching base with them and making sure that they have the information and that we're connecting with them as best we can.
When I think about the official plan, I think about a couple of things. I think about housing and I think about employment zones, housing, zoning, all that sort of stuff, right? I also think about, I don't know, parks and recreation and stuff like that. Like it ought to be possible, easily possible to figure out when and maybe my understanding of the official plan is totally off base, but it ought to be possible to figure out what are the core elements of the official plan. How does the Indigenous community play into that? How does the official plan, the structure of the official plan, allow for the growth of the Indigenous community, allow for the Indigenous community to become stronger? And with that knowledge, who on the ground ought we to consult with? Like that's it seems really, really simple to me, and I'm hoping it's simple. I don't know. I'm hoping it's just as simple as it is, or it seems to be.
Yes, to the co-chairs, I hear you very loud and clear that when and if we can come back to you, we will have done our homework. We will have spoken to members of the community on the ground as well. And yes, I take it all to heart. Thank you for that.
Andrea?
Oh, yeah. I want to say Sukulis Goego, Scano, young lady. And I think I appreciate the presentation that you've made, and as a younger brother to the Yongwahongwe within our confederacy, I always go back to who you are, and what you bring in any form. And so I also want to acknowledge my good colleague and friend Francis. As a wolf clan specific to Honi, what the responsibility is to ensure that you are outreaching, but you're also protecting, and you're tied to that first before anything else. Whether you sit within another area, I think the issue that we talk about is the differences that we have in any of our spaces is that yes, we have the Lodioneso, and we also have the elected system, and so you're part of the Lodioneso process. And so you just remember that. And when you come into the city of Toronto, the IAO is the elected system. It doesn't belong to us. So you want to come and outreach, then it makes it a lot easier to come through task and those around the table. And that's why it's so critical to have those voices here that are community members, to ensure that we're continuing to make sure that our circle is strong. I didn't want to repeat the same thing that Francis is saying, but it's important that you take off that, that comments and be really clear that your report says you spoke initially to the IAO elected system, right? And then you're going forward to speak with us as Ongwahongwe, Anishinaabe, free, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Kanalakwa.
Thank you for that, Andrea. Do we have any further speakers? Any further suggestions from members, comments, questions? Seeing none, as I had mentioned earlier, members, do you have any questions of staff on this item? And if so, please raise your hand or unmute your mic to let me know. So hearing no further speakers and no comments from members, do I have a motion to receive the item? Francis, thank you. And all those in favor, please raise your hands. Thank you. The motion carries. We also have the motion that I mistakenly read earlier regarding this one. I just need to find it again. Actually, I wonder if the clerks might be able to put that on the screen. Is that something you'd be able to do, clerks?
Yes, Mr. Co-Chair.
So I'm not seeing it. Hopefully it can
Mr.
come up
Co-Chair?
soon. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm having some technical difficulties on my part. I will try again to show the to display the motion for you.
Jonathan, I can do it. Just give me 1 second.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. Can everyone see the motion?
Yes. Be a little bigger for old eyes.
That was too fast.
Thank you, Sylvia.
So for anyone who isn't able to see it right now, the motion suggests that the Aboriginal Affairs Advisory Committee requests the Chief Planner and Executive Director, City Planning, to incorporate the committee's suggestions for amplifying Indigenous voices into the engagement process of Our Plan Toronto, the Municipal Comprehensive Review. Any suggestions, comments? Would someone like to move it?
I just wanted to clarify. In terms of what the Aboriginal Advisory Committee members suggest, that these two individuals here in the memo or the motion, they'll be making that happen at their end. So what we say is going to happen in terms of the selection or screening process or whatever.
This motion was for the Our Plan Toronto, not for anything else.
I mean,
it was my understanding that, sorry, go ahead.
I mean, if the motion amounts to okay, you've heard what the folks on the Aboriginal Advisory Committee have to say now with respect to the Our Plan Toronto piece. You know, take their advice. If that's the intent of the motion, then I can't oppose it. I think it's a good thing. If that's what it's saying, can staff comment on whether that's the intent of the motion? Or somebody tell us whether that's the intent of the motion?
Sure.
Motion is for the presenters to take the recommendations and advice mentioned here at the table.
Okay, well, heck, I'll move that. It seems like, you know, I thought we provided good advice, so we'll pass a motion to say, yeah, please listen to us. Sure.
And just to
And
your
this
item,
is-
Tracy, sorry, Brian, it's
Go ahead,
unrelated
sorry,
it's unrelated to the previous items. This is specifically for the presentation we just gave.
So Angus has put the motion forward. All those in favor, please raise your hand. That's everyone. All right. The motion carries. Thank you. Pam, did you want to go ahead at this point?
Yeah, so the next item we have is item 5, Indigenous Heritage Engagement Project. We are very mindful and trying to respect time, and so we are going to look to defer this item. We do want to thank Gary for his time and his patience in today, and hope that we will see him again the next time we hold a meeting. However, we do have a public speaker on the item, and so I would like Catherine Gandy, if she is ready to proceed, to speak if she would like. Alternatively, you are welcome to register again in the next meeting. So I'll ask the committee secretary to confirm that our public speaker, Catherine Gandy, is ready to proceed, and then we will put the motion to the table to vote to defer this item. Is the speaker prepared to speak?
Madam Co-Chair, the registered public speaker is still on the line. Catherine Gandy.
Hello, and so which agenda item am I speaking to?
So this is item number AA11.5, Indigenous Heritage Engagement Project.
Mm-hmm.
You're
Okay,
welcome
thank
to
you.
speak to it now. I'll just remind you that your audio is a little bit compromised. So just if you can speak clearly into your microphone so that the members can clearly hear you the best that they can. You have 5 minutes. And when you're getting close to the end, I will let you know.
So I was just speaking in regards to the sovereignty piece. I think it's really important, to heed the calls of the committee has already put forward, and that there's lots of reports and stuff that can be cited and researched. However, as a grassroots community member, I feel as though that there's a missing piece in terms of being consulted as a Native woman, as a mother.
Sorry, Catherine, I'm just going to interrupt you because your audio is very poor. I am catching some words of it, and I know that your thoughts and your input on these items are extremely valuable. And so it would be unfortunate for the table not to be able to hear your remarks. And because we are deferring this item, I wonder if you would be okay returning to next month's meeting or next meeting to speak on the remaining items, as we are going to defer all next 3 agenda items.
Can you hear me now? Is it more clear?
That's much better, yes.
Oh, okay. So I just want to briefly say, in speaking with community members, elder knowledge keeper, that is a part of matriarchal circle. What we've identified is that it's really key to have a town hall meeting. And I'm not sure, who could lead on this. Possibly Indigenous Affairs Office and or task, possibly. I'm just putting it out there. a town hall meeting, which would include the self-determination piece and as well as the other areas of interest that we are speaking about, health, child welfare, education, post-secondary. And there's many other areas of interest, but I think if a town hall meeting can happen sometime this summer, that would be well on the way in ensuring that all of the voices are being included.
Thank you for that, Ms. Gandy. I just want to note that we do need to have 8 people for quorum, and I'd like to check with the city clerks that we still have quorum. I've just received notice that Pam has had to step away.
Just 1 second, co-chair. We'll confirm momentarily. Okay, co-chairs, we currently do not have quorum. I will ask my colleague Jonathan to conduct a quorum check, and then we can advise on how to proceed. So I'll turn it over to Jonathan.
Thank you, Sylvia.
Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you, co-chair. Let me just Sir Co-Chair, is Pam the co-chair is coming back,
Pam
or she just
has had to leave.
Thank you. Sir Co-Chair, members, I'll make a roll call now of the committee. Andrea, Christian,
Andrea Christian, I'm here.
Angus Palmer.
I'm here.
Blanche. At present. Brian Winters.
I'm here.
Francis Sanderson.
Present.
Jeffrey Schiffer.
I'm here at the moment, but can't stay much longer. Gretch.
Thank you. Larry Frost. Councillor Mike Layton.
I'm here.
Millie Knapp. Nancy Martin. Pamela Hart. Regina Hartwig. Ruth Collinsar Green. Steve Dickens. Suzanne Brunel.
I'm present.
Thank you. Tanya Sang. Tracy King. Co-chair.
Yes,
Members
Jonathan.
present are Andrea, Angus, Brian, Francis Anderson, Jeffrey Schiffer, Councillor Mike Layton, and Suzanne Brunel. Members not present, Blanche, Larry Frost, Millie Knapp, Nancy Martin, Pamela Hart, Regina Hartwig, Ruth Collinsar Green, Steve Dickens, Tanya Seng, and Tracy King. Members, we only have 7 members. We do not have quorum. The meeting cannot proceed. All items will be carried over to the next meeting of the Aboriginal Affairs Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Jonathan. Would
Sorry.
possible, go ahead, Sylvia.
Sorry, no, just to jump in. So there is a provision. So given the time, sensitive the time and sensitive of people jumping off, if we regain quorum, because quorum was lost at 12:35, there's a 15-minute window during which we could potentially proceed. But again, as Jonathan said, if we do not regain quorum, we cannot go forward. So we're in your hands. If I understand other members have to leave, I don't know if there's a potential for members coming back within the 15-minute window.
I don't know that I anticipate people to come back. Members, do any of you have any insight?
No, Brian, I think what you got is what you got. And I think what's going to happen is there's going to be fewer and fewer if we go much longer because people have a commitment. Yeah. The next Zoom call is in hold already. So I think that's what's going to happen. And I think you should just pull the plug. My advice. Up to everybody else.
I have to agree, Francis. And I'd like to know if you or Suzanne or Andrea would like to close this out in a good way.
Sure, I can.
Nakamik, thank you.
General Miigwech, thank you for giving us this opportunity. Thank you for the rain that fell today. Gives us all pause to remember that not every day is the sunny, shiny walk down our path. We have days when we have to take cover. There are days when we shelter. There are days that help us to think about the next day coming. Creator, you've given us a lot to think about in the past couple of weeks, a lot to think about those little ones who are now speaking to us. They've been waiting for an opportunity, and the opportunity is now. So, Creator, help us all to listen to what they're saying. Help us to heed the words of those yet to come. I know my mother used to say, from the mouths of babes come the truths, the innocent ones. So let's listen to those mouths of babes and what they have to say. Help us to take a moment on Monday, on Indigenous Peoples Day. Help us to remember all those who came before, all those who are here right now, and all those who are yet to show their faces. Creator, help us all to be better people. Help us to be kind, caring, understanding, but most of all, respectful of all those we meet, all those in our circle, all those in our family. So for all these blessings and gifts and thoughts that we have, Creator, help us to be grateful for what we have. For all these things, Creator, we say miigwech, chimigwech. Thank you. Have a good weekend, all, and happy Indigenous Peoples Day.
Thank you, everyone, for your work and your words today. Have a great weekend. Take care.
Yeah, you guys take care. Chat with you next. Are we setting another time? Another date? Are we going to defer to the next scheduled date, or?
The last items, yeah, we can't effectively complete them now, so it will be in August. Jonathan, the date was August